Salut, ça va? Santé?
Coucou, bienvenue from France. Welcome back to the show where we talk about life, different perspectives, and the petit peu du français, usually with a glass of wine or sometimes a spritz. So our topic today is what I'd like to say to the French, respectfully, of course, as an American living in Provence. Before I get there, I thought it might be helpful. A lot of you have reached out with planning a trip to France or Europe in general and have been asking what to pack. And this is particularly relevant because my sister is actually coming to visit me for the first time in 3 years. I'm super excited. She lives in Chicago. She has 3 boys, twins and a baby. It was really cute. Her husband actually bought her an Air France ticket for Christmas. And she's a teacher, so she's finishing her school year this week. And then she is getting on a plane from Chicago to Paris. It's her first time in Paris. I'm meeting her there. And then we are taking the train to Aix, and she's staying with us for a few days. So I'm super excited because she's never even seen where we live, and it's been 3 years. So it'll be really nice. But she is notoriously, and Courtney, if you're listening to this, I think you would agree, she is not a packer. She kind of like throws things in. It's like a bit disorganized. She's usually missing something. And she usually says, I'll go in closet Kim. And then she takes anything I have in my closet or my suitcase, which I'm totally fine with. But she asked, what do I pack? I don't even know what people are wearing. So first of all, I found this funny article the other day that said people in Europe don't dress like Emily in Paris, the TV show. And I was like, of course not. Like, do people actually think that? So I thought I would let you know, like, of course they don't. Like, that would be so overdressed and you would look kind of ridiculous if you tried to mimic that look. So here's the things I said to her, all in a text, and I thought it might be helpful for me to share. So I said, pack dresses and skirts, preferably more kind of long skirts. I would skip like a heavy or even any kind of jacket. It's pretty warm, and I think it's going to continue to be really warm. Maybe like a light cardigan or just a sweater you can throw over a few outfits. I'd said, don't even worry about shorts. Nobody really wears shorts. It's going to be kind of like a full standout if you're wearing shorts as an American, with the exception of there are these super cool jorts right now that are like long to your knee shorts that I'm seeing everywhere. But I really think you have to have the right look to kind of pull that off in a good way. I would also say pants are fine, like jeans. It's hot though, or like just kind of long, like flowy, comfortable pants. Sandals, as long as you can walk in them, cool sneakers. The 2 biggest sneaker trends I'm seeing right now in both Paris and in the south of France are a lot of Adidas Sambas, a lot in the maroon color, which I like. And then, of course, the trend that's sort of everywhere, the New Balance, which has gone all the way down to my 7-year-old daughter begging for a pair. And they are in like brown and white or gray and white. Again, super comfortable, easy to walk around the city in, kind of goes with dresses, skirts, pants, just about anything. I also told her to always overpack underwear. That's like an easy one that's super small that you can condense, that in case anything ever happens, you've always got underwear. This is kind of just like a thing I always do. I try to avoid checking luggage at all costs. Instead, I buy these little packing cubes that allow you to roll and then zip, and then they're all organized. I can send the link in the show notes if you're interested. And it just kind of organizes your suitcase really nice and allows like the dresses and the kind of bigger things to be super compact, so you can pack it all in a carry-on that fits in the overhead compartment. If you feel like you need to check luggage, always pack an extra pair of clothes in your carry-on, just because you never know what's going to happen. And then also the thing I like to do is pack like a really nice foldable tote that you can easily put within your suitcase, that whether you're going to the market or let's say you want one that zips for things you want to buy here, then you could easily just check that, or it could be a separate carry-on as well. So I always do that when I go somewhere I know I'm going to want to buy a few things. So that's kind of my packing list. If you guys have any questions, let me know, or anything you want to add to this. I'm happy to share this around. So, okay, I wanted to get into what I'd like to say to the French, respectfully, of course, living here. And this isn't done from like a cruel, mean way. It's actually just for somebody to be able to sort of walk through France with as an American and what we go through and just some like kind of ways that I'm seeing the world that's different, I think, than the culture I'm surrounded by. And I'm going to just share kind of my story. So I, as you guys know, for the past 3 years have been living among the French. I watch them, I engage with them. I can blend in pretty easily now. I love shopping at their boutiques. I don't feel like just visually I would stand out that much. I do the same things as them. I go to a lot of the same restaurants, museums, etc. But to be clear, I was not born here. I don't share the language, obviously, the culture, the history, the deeply rooted traditions. And I would say my cover is blown that I am not from here, like the second I open my mouth. Both my accent in French, my word choices are probably more like a toddler, maybe like a primary school student at this point, if I'm being nice to myself, but definitely not like an educated adult. I think my daughter the other day said to me, it sounds like you say, I want cookies. So that's apparently how I'm sounding in French. So it's technically, in fact, when you fill out your visa, etc., here, you have to check a box that says étranger. Étrangère is the actual pronunciation, and it means you're an outsider, a stranger, if you will. And so no matter how long I live here, I can live among the culture, enjoy the culture, learn the language, but I will never fully belong. And I'm honestly like completely okay with that. I'm not asking to be French or even partially French. In fact, I would say I'm mostly proud to be an American. I use mostly with a bit of caution. But I think if you know that a culture you're living in is not your own, it's important to do what you can, I think, to adapt or learn the language or understand cultural norms, especially if you're living and you're going to school and if you're working in that country. I just think those are polite things to do as someone who's not from that particular area. So what I'd like to do, and if any French person is listening that would like to do this with me, I kind of want to just like do a little walk and talk and show you what it's like to be an étrangère in their country. So I want to say a few things and show them a few things. Just like for me, it's been a way to experience and see another way to live. It's been so invigorating, enlightening. I just want to have them see my perceptions as someone who's culturally different, but also very, very happy to live in their country. So the first thing I would say is soften the look. So this is the furrowed brow, the squinted eyes, the kind of stern, straight, tight-lipped expression. The word comment? I know the French might be trying to understand what I'm saying. And I know that the way I am speaking their beautiful language probably honestly sounds a bit like nails on a chalkboard. But it's also that I'm making mistakes, right? Like I'm not conjugating my verbs correctly. I'm probably mispronouncing a few words. I'm forgetting kind of key vocabulary words and trying to say something else to get to that vocabulary word. I'm confusing. There's every noun has a masculine or feminine. It's lui or la, and I'm probably confusing which ones are which. There's different ways you address you. There's in English, we just have everyone is you. In French, vous is for more formal situations and tu is for someone you know very well. And it's considered pretty impolite for someone, if I'm addressing someone I don't know, especially if they're older than me, that I would use tu. That would be incorrect. I would have to use vous. So just for background, I'm sure I've made that mistake as well. And so I feel like as I'm going through the day, I'm kind of in this like very humble position, like almost on my knees, just begging to be understood, praying I understand. And what nobody really sees is that behind the scenes, I am putting in like thousands of hours over the past 3 years of French lessons. I am watching TV and movies when I have the time in French, still with French subtitles, but better than nothing. I practice French conversations when I can with French friends. I kind of speak more Franglish, not just immediately resort to English. I listen to French podcasts. Again, these are all things I'm just sharing as ways that I am trying to communicate and kind of be understood and have the French understand me. So my question for them is maybe just soften the look a little bit, maybe do things like I try to do if I'm in the US and I am noticing that somebody is a non-native English speaker. And I do this here as well, because if I am speaking with someone who English is their second or third language, I slow down. I use more simple vocabulary because I realize that this is really hard for them. And I try to do everything I can to make them feel at ease. I smile, I kind of slow down, I repeat things in two different ways. I just try to make them more confident and make them feel like they're doing a good job as they're attempting to speak and understand. And maybe you're asking, like, well, why do you do that? I do that because now I fully understand that learning another language as an adult, especially a challenging one like French, is incredibly hard. And I appreciate that they're trying. That person who's trying to speak English to me is definitely making an attempt to communicate with me. And I know how intimidating it can be to speak to a native, like someone who's native in that language. Like when I speak to a native French person, I am more nervous than if I speak to another person who French is their second or third language. So it's a humbling experience. It's a lot of work to learn a new language. So I am just trying to make their life a little bit easy. That said, what happens, as I would like to the French to notice, is all of that work is behind the scenes and it can fall apart in one interaction. Like I said the wrong word at a pharmacy, for example, and literally I was trying to get something called Doliprane, which is basically Tylenol. And instead I got basically like a diarrhea medication, which is not at all what I wanted, but it was because I didn't pronounce the word for Tylenol correctly. And then she just assumed something else. And there you go. Voila. That's what I walked home with. And I was like, this is not what I need. But of course, at that point, you either need to go back or I didn't even know what to do because I'm like, I think I'm saying this word right, but clearly I wasn't. So I would just like to kind of walk them around and have them realize how hard it is to be like a capable woman who suddenly sounds like really unintelligent. I kind of like to make jokes in my own language. I am not funny in French. I'm definitely not sharp. Like I'm not tracking a conversation. I'm not really totally myself. In fact, my personality, I would say, is like trapped behind all this vocabulary that I just don't have. And a lot of times I'm resorting to like a nod or like a thumbs up or something that's trying to communicate words I may not have. And yet I'm still trying and I'm not giving up because I love living here. And I feel like if you live in another country and you don't speak the language, I thought of this analogy. It's kind of like if I were sitting at this window and it was shut and my hands and face are like pressed against it and I'm watching life happen outside of it, but I'm not part of it. I'm just an observer. And I don't want to be just an observer. I want to understand it. I want to feel comfortable being more immersed in it. And I think a lot of people, it's funny, I talk to like my parents or friends back in the US and they're like, wow, you've been there 3 years. You must be fully fluent. And I think people assume that just because a language is around you all of the time, that you just pick it up. And that is so far from the truth. Like you actually need to make an effort to learn. Like I don't work in French. I work in English. I would say my friends now are a mix of French and English speakers, but not when I first moved here. It was almost all English speakers. And I think if you don't make an effort to learn, you're just going to feel more like an outsider because they're not going to understand anything you're trying to say, and you're not going to understand anything. And then you're really just sort of this outsider living within a different culture, which I think is even a little bit harder. So that's just my first thing. I would say soften the look. Just try to recognize that we as outsiders are trying to speak the beautiful language because it is so culturally integrated in France. The second thing I would say is I would like to say to the French respectfully again, that rigidity and structure are not always your friend. So I didn't really realize until I moved here how much of my life in the US was sort of without a lot of rules, like cultural rules. I mean, you could pretty much do what you wanted when you wanted, like meaning you could order like late night pizza at 3 a.m. if you wanted. You could have lunch at 2 p.m. You could skip a breakfast. You could have like a green smoothie and call that breakfast on the go. Like they're just, nobody really cares. It's like eating routines, times of things are sort of fluid. And I noticed that more and more as I'm here, and I had to like really adapt to the cultural rules of when, what, how, where, etc. you are allowed to like have the routine. So, for example, lunch is only from 12 to 2, no later than 2 o'clock. It's almost impossible to find a restaurant open past 2 for lunch. So, just those of you who are visiting, don't try to have a late lunch. There's something called goûter here, which we've talked about a lot in the podcast. That's usually from 4 to 6. That is typically something sweet, like a crepe or a waffle or something chocolate. The most common actually is what kids have, which it sounds gross, but it's actually delicious. It's you cut a baguette in half, you put delicious French salted butter in, and then you put a bar of chocolate in between the baguette and the butter. And it's very indulgent, very rich, but really, really delicious. That's an apéro that parents might pack for their kids if they have an after school activity, for example. And then there's something called apéro, which is like their happy hour. So happy hour is normally not before 7. I actually thought it was at 5, but a French friend of mine recently told me like, no, it's really supposed to be not until 7. I think that one might be slightly more fluid, but definitely not before 5 o'clock. And then dinner is no earlier than 7:30, 8. I would say 7:30, 8 are the most common. And that is like really, really sacred because there are not, I am literally yet to find, I think I found 2 restaurants that are actually like sit down restaurants that are open before 7 p.m. So it's almost impossible to eat dinner before 7 p.m. And then it's like what you drink, if you choose to have a cocktail, like if you want an Aperol Spritz or a glass of champagne, that's considered the aperitif. And it's really only before a meal. So it's not like you could drink the Spritz with your meal. That would be considered kind of bizarre. In fact, a lot of waiters would wait until you have finished your Spritz before they would actually even serve your meal because the meal is meant to be had with wine. And then, of course, follow the rules on wine, like white with fish, red with meat, and then no wine after the meal. If it's dessert time, like it's time to stop drinking. It is time to have dessert and a cafe. And the cafe is usually the end signal of the meal. And almost every French person I know typically has a cafe after their meal. So again, I'm explaining all of this again because these are just so many rules that I was like, wow, you really have to learn the rules and then adapt within the structure. And there's some ways that, in Paris and bigger cities that you can potentially color outside the lines, if you will, with respect to this, but not really. The second place I found the rigidity is with my children's school. So I took for granted, and again, I was in California, San Francisco, at schools that definitely, I would say, fostered open-mindedness, very creative thinking, like thinking outside of the box, a lot of multidisciplinary learning where you might create something very like intricate. Like my son in first grade made an entire like Ferris wheel and he had to use math and reading and science. So you use all of the subjects together to create something innovative. And while academics are important, they often carry equal weight in the US with like social emotional skills, creativity, innovation. I would say I have not heard the words like social emotional growth used. I rarely hear the word innovation used in my children's schools. It is much more rigid with academics being the primary and lead and almost like only focus. That's like sit at your desk, only spoke when spoken to, do it this way. It's really the only way that it should be done. And so this rigidity and conformity in the academic system is just highly ingrained, both within, I would say, like French public schools, private schools, and international schools. And I would say behaving well is just the absolute expectation and you're not going to get a pat on the back for behaving well. It's just the kind of baseline. And if you are behaving outside of that, it is definitely very much like punished and looked down upon. So I just find this interesting because it kind of for me came to a head when I have had my children's conferences, and they immediately just go into what the children's grade is and how they're performing in, like, I would say 3 to 4 key subjects. And those really are just like reading and writing, mathematics, and maybe sometimes science, but primarily like math, reading, and writing. They don't talk about art or creativity. I have to ask about, like, well, how are they doing socially? That is never something that's brought up at a conference. So I'm just sharing this because I kind of realized, like, that's really interesting. Like, I feel like maybe a lot of innovation comes out of the United States. Like, think about Silicon Valley and all of the amazing tech is because we as a culture have fostered that in our children from a young age. And then I think of, like, how the French culture is just operating very differently, and there's just less entrepreneurship, et cetera, here. And I wonder how much of that actually goes back to like how they school their children. So not bad or good. Again, just like something I kind of would like to say respectfully to the French, like, it's nice to have routines and structure, but there's also really nice ability to have some flexibility and value some creativity and innovation to allow children to form more like open-minded ideas and be able to come up with, cool ideas and try new things in the future. So that's, again, just me as an American sharing my perspective of the good and the bad. And I think what's interesting and what I've realized, like, I have fallen in love with France in so many ways. Like, I love that the meals still matter here. Like, even lunch, it's not something that's like being inhaled over your keyboard while you're answering emails, which is 100% what I used to do. I love that there's like third gathering places, I'm going to call them, like everywhere. It's where you can sit outside at a cafe. It's totally normal to sit alone. You can really just like engage in conversation, not be on a phone, pull out like an actual hardcover book and take time to read it. I love that children are like in this way. It's very different from the schooling. They are not on screens, and they don't have like this sort of rigidity of like, you have to do this on the weekends. Like, they're, yes, expected to be with the parents and sit at the table and participate, but not in like a way that they feel that they need to be entertained all the way. Like, they are okay being bored, and they're allowing that sort of mentality of like live in the moment to be infiltrated to children even at a young age. I also love that the French really protect pleasure here, like fiercely protected. Like, if they want to have an apéro in the sun after work, like, they will do that, and nobody is going to like think twice about that. They think it's just part of every single day to have a wonderful, warm, freshly baked baguette that you will see almost every French person is carrying a baguette at some point during the day to bring home that evening for their dinner. They love, as many of you know, Europe basically, and definitely the French and French culture shuts down completely the whole month of August. And they have multiple other vacations, as you know, throughout the year. They love a long late night dinner that kind of extends as long as people are enjoying themselves, and the waiter lets them sit there as long as they want, and there's no rushing to get the check or leave the table. And I think it's really taught me that like life is not something we have to constantly chase. Like, as an American, I feel like we're always trying to like improve life or like think about optimizing something. And the French are really just trying to enjoy life. And I think that has kind of changed me a lot more than I even expected. Like, it's made me a lot like softer in good ways. I'm learning, I wouldn't say I'm good at this, but I'm learning to slow down. I'm learning to rush less, and I catch myself doing that. And I actively pause and ask myself like why I'm rushing and what I could either let go of or do things differently to not be in that rush. I noticed this is a big one over 3 years. I'm much more present. I live in a lot more moments, especially with my children, like just soaking them in, really listening to what they're saying. I notice things that I would not have noticed in the US. Like if somebody asked me, well, how does the sunlight like look in the evening versus in the mornings in California? Like I would have no idea because I wasn't even paying attention. But here I can tell you like the sun at different times and the way it hits the terracotta roofs here around like 6 o'clock and the shadows it creates. And it's just really beautiful. And I wouldn't have noticed this unless I was present and aware enough to notice it. And even like I love Thursday, Friday evenings when the city's like really buzzing and everyone's like outside in this square with a lot of cafes and you can hear just the sound of like the language and the clinking of glasses, like cheers and the live music and just the energy is really, really beautiful. And I think just like being present to that is very cool. I think the other things I've fallen in love with, like just these rituals of like, I go to the same, it's called the poissonnerie, which is the fish vendor. And I go every single week because I love picking up fresh fish. And he literally drives in like a truck from Marseille and just has all the fish displayed. And it's funny, it's a family run business. And now his mom knows me, the son knows me, and they every single time come behind their truck, give me the deux bisous, like 2 kisses, and say, oh, bonjour, ça va, salut, you know, how are your kids? How are your family? And the conversation goes on in French for a bit. And then they always throw in free lemons for me because now they know me. And it just, I like that beauty in the repetition here. And I think there's just something nice about no one's like constantly trying to strive and be someone else or be somewhere else. And so all of this is not a criticism. Like it's simply sharing like what it feels like for me to live inside another culture and carry my own culture inside myself. And I think the way I like to describe it is like I belong partially to both places, but I don't belong completely to either one. And maybe that's kind of just what being like a stranger outsider really is. It's not necessarily rejection. It's not loneliness exactly. It's kind of learning to exist in this space between understanding and then misunderstanding like every single day. And yet I'm kind of just also really grateful for this opportunity. Like I'm super grateful to live in this country. I'm grateful for the life my children are experiencing here. And I'm actually just really grateful that it has forced me to question so many things I just once automatically accepted about my own culture and who I was. And I think, you know, as I'm going through this, like I realize that there are so many things that the French would like to say to me as an American, right? Like I've heard a lot of them. I don't need to get into all of them here. Besides, you know, they think we're rude. They think we dress terrible. They think, you know, 8 million things. They think we eat impolitely. I get that. And sometimes, yes, like, all of those things can be true. But I think there's also something nice and beautiful about Americans that I love being an American for this reason. Like we're very open. Like when I'm going back to the US soon, and I will definitely like have strangers come up to me in the checkout line at the grocery store and maybe just tell me like their life story out of the blue and make small talk. They might tell me they like my shoes or I might do the same for them. And it's actually like a genuine compliment. We can be super casual about the meals. Like I can guarantee you when I go to my parents' house, like some people might be sitting, standing, like everyone will be eating at different times, like running around with like half-eaten plates and kids. And it's just, there's no structure and it's super casual. And I think the smiling, as I mentioned in another episode, like I'm going to see a lot more people in the US smiling. And I like that exchange. I think it's a nice way to recognize someone else's company and just be like kind souls to each other as we sort of go through this world. So I know that the French want to say a lot of things, but I know that there's also good, amazing things about our American culture as well. And so I think if I were to summarize all of this for you, I'd say, yes, of course, there are things I'd like to say to the French respectfully. But here's the other thing I've come to believe. I actually think we're not so different in the ways that really matter the most. Like we're all just people. Like as I get to know more and deeper, as I get to know more of the French culture and make French friends, like we're all just humans who are trying to make a good life, like trying to find meaning in life, trying to raise children who turn out okay. love the people we surround ourselves with, and really just like squeeze the most out of this one beautiful life that we get. And I don't think we're all that different in that way. I think the French, like if I were to speak to you, you do it with a lot more elegance and discipline and a commitment to pleasure that I deeply respect and admire. And I do it as an American, probably a bit louder, maybe sometimes with a giant water bottle, or as this case, a glass of wine before 5 o'clock. And I don't really feel guilty for that either. So maybe there's room for both. And to all of my French friends, like I am grateful and I appreciate you, and just wanted to send a little, I would say, quick love letter, if you will. So let me know what you thought of this episode. What I'm going to start doing is reading just a few comments from some of our listeners. And for all of you that have been listening, I just want to say thank you. And I love your comments. I personally respond to everyone. And I wanted to just share a few of them at the end of this episode. So I got a comment from Erin Fernandez List. She listened to Conversations from Paris, where I interviewed Sammy Royal, who is a photographer. And she said, my wonderful friend is also a photographer based in Paris. His name is Alfredo Cesar. And she then put his Instagram. She said, I got hooked on this podcast because of him. Thanks. And I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Erin, for leaving your message. She's left me a few messages. So thank you, Erin, for listening. I have one from Espatastia, and she or he listened to What Really Happens When You Move Abroad. She wrote, thank you so much, Kim. I can relate to what you were saying. Although I live in Greece and I am a teacher, this inner struggle is universal. I'm so happy for you for making the big decision and enjoying your life so much more. You and your podcast are truly inspiring. Thank you so much. And then I also am going to read one actually from a French man I met in Paris. He was with his cousin and they invited me. We're at a wine bar in the 11th in Paris, and I was there alone with my book. And he struck up a conversation telling me about his wife and kids, and his cousin was meeting him who lived in Paris. And anyways, I was sharing that I was there in Paris to record some podcast episodes with some great guests. And he wrote to me, I really like your podcast. I'm Cyril, the one you met in Paris on May 5th with his cousin. Thank you, Cyril, and thanks for listening. So again, thank you everyone for your messages, and please let me know what you thought. And don't forget to share this with someone that you know that might be French or thinking of moving to French or just interested in French culture. And also please follow us on cuckoo.pod on Instagram. Thanks again. Bye-bye.